So the YWCA has two specific missions: elimination of racism and empowerment of women. And I can't think of two missions that are most paramount, particularly where we find ourselves as a nation. The elimination of the conversation of racism, but most importantly, how do we eliminate and how do we address these issues? And the empowerment of women. When you're looking at the state of women in America, how do we ensure that they are developing economic support, economic power, not only for themselves, but most importantly for their families and for their communities. Let's start with opportunities for jobs. Let's talk about pay equity, the fact that we still earn less than men in this country. Let's talk about not just access to education, but access to technology and innovation. Let's talk about healthcare. You know, what the disparities for women healthcare. We're going through this conversation right now, this big debate, I should say, in Congress about the Affordable Health Care Act. How does that impact women in particular, especially women of color? When you look at disparities in the healthcare system, when you look at disparities in economics, when you look at disparities in just how we are represented in the halls of power, whether it's in Congress or in corporate, there's a lot to be done still. Huge improvements are high school graduation rates, right? If you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, our graduation rates were still very low. Our participation in college graduation is also growing. We're graduating more women of college degrees. And that's why the other issues that come along, the economic issues, the pay equity issues, have to go hand in hand with these successes. One of the first things we must do when we're addressing domestic violence is to pull it out of the shadows, to be able to talk about it, to give women the understanding that they are supported, that there are resources out there, that they're not alone, so that they're not silent. Because the shame of speaking about a partner or someone that you know can lead to these situations where you find these casualties. And it's so heart-wrenching because it's not just the death of a woman, it's also the death of a sister, of a mother, of a daughter, of a community leader, of a friend. With regards to the Week Without Violence, the YWCA prides itself. We've been at the forefront. We've been talking about these issues, but we're not just talking about them. We've been advocates, whether it's on the Hill, proposing legislation or advocating for the reauthorization of VAWA, of specific legislations that support violence, elimination of violence against women. But we also want to make sure that the appropriation dollars are there to support these programs. There's a lot of debate that's coming up soon on the budget. We have to understand that in order to make changes in our community, we must be focused on policy, programs, and budgets. All of this impacts the way that our communities receive the type of support that they need and the way they impact on the individual level. So we'll have our 215 associations will be very engaged in our Week Without Violence. You'll see a lot of events happening, gatherings, support groups, but most importantly, have this conversation at home. This should be a conversation that we are not ashamed of having among our families and among our friends. I think you've mentioned two very important ones. Obviously, law enforcement. How do we engage with law enforcement? How comfortable do we feel and trust that law enforcement will actually make sure that women are safe? Those safe spaces, whether it's coming to a YWCA, whether it's going to different organizations that provide services. But let's also talk about empowerment. You know, why do women stay with partners that are mistreating them, that are having acts of violence? At times it's because economically they also feel that they can't leave, right? So let's talk about economic empowerment as well as a pillar to help women become much more independent. So we want to make sure that those networks, that whether it's workforce development, opportunities to job, healthcare, housing, opportunities for your children, are all kind of a comprehensive wraparound services that various YWCAs are delivering to our communities. The way to support your local YWCA is volunteering. That would be the first step. The second step is being engaged with the operations of the YWCA. The third step is donating. But more importantly, it's letting people know that we exist, that we're here to serve the community. It's elevating the YWCA and the work that we do day in and day out in over 47 states. So making sure that individuals understand what are the resources available to them.